Thomas Bitmatta is one of the top racers in the world. There is no doubt in my mind after the interview that we just did. Thomas has been racing since he was 12. He is a very accomplished racer. Now, originally he started in RC and eventually he got into drones. Now, the interesting thing is in 2014, he wasn't really interested in winning. He didn't really care. He just wanted to go to the drone events and he wanted to see people and kind of meet people. And then one day he beat the best guy in the area and that lit a fire in him. And since then he has wanted to win over and over again. But it's more than just winning to him. It's about the people too. Great interview. Really enjoyed talking to this guy. Hey, I want to tell you something. We have new perks for Patreons. If you join my Patreon, you get Discord. Come talk to me, come talk to the other people in the community. So not only do you get the podcast, but now you get Discord. I plan on upping the privileges soon. So anyways, thank you for coming along. I hope you enjoy this one and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the man that needs no introduction, one of the best racers in the world, Thomas Bitmatta, aka BMS Thomas. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Now, I hear that you've been way down south recently.
Yeah, south and then, well, right of where I normally live, I guess, if you look at a map.
That'd be the east.
I don't know. I'm
right?
not good at directions. East, yeah.
if it was a race course, you'd know what turn it was. But
yeah. Oh man, it's so funny because I got my license now with the car, right? Always I need Dad to tell me where I am because I'll get lost, right? Like I'm not, dangerous obviously, but I will literally have no idea where I am, right? Without a GPS, just completely lost. Yeah. But when I've got the goggles on, man, I don't need an OSD to tell me where home is. I just know exactly where I am and where I'm going. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why. It's like the goggles turns on pigeon mode in my brain and I just know where I am. But as soon as the goggles are off,
have you ever heard about they did this huge so apparently the hardest city to navigate is London, or one of the hardest cities. And somebody did this huge study about they would like in order to be a black cab operator, you've got to go through a lot of training. And there's to get the license to do it. And they did a study on these guys' brains as they went through the training. They'd periodically use MRI to image their brains. And I can't remember which portion of the brain it is, but there's a portion of the brain that controls for basically geospatial orientation. And as these guys got more and more trained, deeper and deeper into the system, that part of their brain grew.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so I don't know, man. Sometimes I talk to guys that are really good, you, Evan, Vanover, Drew. And I just think, man, I wonder if we could image your brains from when you started until now and see what the difference is. I bet there'd be huge differences.
It'd be cool. Anyway. I'd love to get into that stuff. All the sciencey stuff I'm really into. Yeah. So especially as the racing gets on and you look at the stuff they do in other sports, especially Formula One, since obviously they've got the mental aspect and the physical aspect too, and sort of seeing what they do and sort of the parallels, and it's interesting. I reckon that stuff. It's going to be really cool to explore that. I can't wait.
So, I mean, what do you You're what, 16, 17 now?
I'm 20.
Oh, you're 20?
Yep.
I'm sorry, man.
It's fine.
I'm sorry. Look, here in the US, when you say you just got your license, it's oh, okay, well, you must be 16. So,
yeah. In Australia, driving age is 18.
Okay.
But because I had year 12 and that was sort of the point where I started taking racing more seriously, I just didn't have time to drive. I think in the first year, I clocked up 3 hours of driving in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And then the second year, I did everything.
Cool, man. Well, all right. So you're 20. My apologies. I feel like a jerk.
That's fine. That's
fine. So what's, so I guess you're out of primary, secondary, whatever y'all call it over there.
Yeah, out of high school, got into the course I wanted for university, but deferred for a year to race. That was the year I did DR1. Missed out on the IO that year because DR1 was on at the same time, but I had FAI Shenzhen, the first FAI Grand Final. I think it's the first FAI Grand Final. But it's the really cool track that was the shape of the Chinese knot. Mm-hmm. had a lot of good things happen that year. And then
Mm-hmm.
sort of second year, I couldn't defer anymore. So I had to decide whether I wanted to do uni or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to stick with this.
Oh, wow, really? Okay, so like how long do you think that like I mean you are effectively or are you effectively making a living off of racing?
Um, it's one of those things that's hard to quantify. I live with my
Right.
parents, so I don't really have
Okay.
expenses.
Hmm.
So all of the money I get, I just dump straight back into the racing.
Okay.
I think if you played it smart,
Hmm.
especially if you got into like a league, that's when you could genuinely make a living, like so you can actually pay for
Right.
living expenses and then race. Um, for me though, I love doing crazy tech stuff. So alongside the racing, I tend to also splurge on buying random stuff like supercapacitors and that, and just playing with random tech. So
Yeah.
I probably don't use my money the most carefully,
Hmm.
but I'm doing what I love, and I think just the more I chip away at it, it'll get better and better. And the other thing too for me is that, like, if you look at maybe what I've got for a single like human being, it's good. But then also
Hmm.
my dad does so much support for me. So if you added his time, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can quantify and so many things to account for. Um, yeah,
Well, and it's interesting you talk about time. Like I put a lot of time into this YouTube channel, and I actually did, I did some averages and did the math last year and like figured out that okay, well, I made money on YouTube, which was great. Um, but I was working for $8 an hour.
yeah, that's sort of what it's like. I mean, we don't even
Yeah.
get to do YouTube that much anymore, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I want to get back into it. That one thing I'm hoping to fix this year. I said I was going to
Okay.
do it last year. That sort of like started really well and then fell apart at the end of the year. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping this year I'll give it a better go. I think it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, the other thing is, yeah, maybe I'm not making a super massive profit or anything, but also I love this, right? And the fact that I get to
Yeah.
travel and I get to play with tech, stuff that I just wouldn't get to touch, the people I get to connect with. If you try to add that value, I mean, it's stuff you can't really quantify easily, right? It's sort of one of those things, how much that means to you personally. So it's like, well, sure, I could probably, get a job somewhere and be making more money and whatever, but I mean, I love this. So
Yeah. I mean,
why would
what,
I
but
change it?
like, what price tag can you put on the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, and it's like if I put all my time to a job or something, it's like I'll have all that money, but I'll have nothing to do with it. So
Yeah.
this, it's like, there's always something I can explore, whether it's in the drone racing, the cinematics, going to more events. There's always some way you can spend your money that's going to equate to something interesting, something cool.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's really funny. Like I had coming out of high school, I had almost the exact opposite experience that you had. Um, I I got into college, but I didn't turn my paperwork in on time. And so I ended up missing a semester. And my mom and dad had basically said, I'm one of five. So my mom and dad said, hey, you gotta get out. So they actually, I mean, they helped support me. They gave me, they set me up in a like studio apartment, whatnot. Um, but then I had to work. And
yeah,
like I worked as a short order cook at a Greek restaurant for 6 months. And by the time that 6 months was up, I was like, I'm gonna go to college. Like
yeah,
I hate this. I don't ever want to do this kind of work again. I'm going to college.
yeah,
So it is really interesting, like how I mean the time that you're in right now will definitely shape a lot of how you think and what you do. And like I know that pardon me if I'm speaking like a dad, but like if one of my sons was in your position, I'd be like, go race. Go do it.
yeah.
You can stay here. We'll figure it out. It's just the experience is too rich to not take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that modern times has sort of brought us, right? I mean, sure, I haven't really been on this all that long to be like, oh, all worldly wisdom. But, even just in my short lifetime, how things have changed and how connected the world is. And I guess even with our education system, where if you do move away from it, there's always pathways back in. Like, it's not like, oh, you stop doing it, your life's over. So I think it's one of those things. It's a balance. You got to look at how much things are worth for yourself and, what you want to put into it. And are the risks worth it? So, like for me, when I had school, I still focused on school primarily. It was only when I was out of school, it was sort of like, let's have a hard think about this. Where could this go?
Hmm.
And yeah, that's where I ended up.
Now, there's so like when you think of education, right? Like everybody immediately goes, "Oh, you got to go to college." What are the secondary and tertiary skills that you've learned with this crazy racing thing?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, they talk about how with college that you need to like, connect with businesses and stuff. Like it'll get you in that industry already. But I mean, at least with the field that I was looking at, which is mechatronics, when I was doing, well, going to go to university, like you're working on UAVs and stuff, done that. Focusing on software, hardware, robotics. We're doing all that. Talking about connecting with different businesses and that. I mean, working with T-Motor, Impulse RC, all sorts of companies that have, obviously really crazy tech backgrounds and, different cultures. So I think it's very much the practical. It's almost like you've skipped part of the school step, but then you've also got like, I mean, T-Motor's teaching me how motors work. Tattoo's teaching me battery chemistry. HQ's helped me with like aerodynamics and stuff. So it's almost like, okay, this is stuff we need to know now. Let's focus on this. And I think because probably it's not that school environment of you have to do this and this and this. You just sort of want to do it. I think you end up with more well-rounded sort of base of information, or at least more tailored to you. That's sort of, I guess, how the workforce would be. But I think everything's got its pros and cons. I do miss the structure of school and having a schedule to follow. Like now I have to make my own, which is sort of, it can be hard sometimes, but also the other thing is I like this a lot, so it's easy to put heaps of hours into it. So yeah, it's all a balance.
You left out a whole set of skills that you've learned though. How much videography have you learned? How much photography have you learned? How much, um, you know, skills like that do you think that you could, put into the workforce?
That's true. That's actually a lot of stuff that I haven't thought of, which is a good point. I never really thought of video editing as something that, that I picked up from this. I guess there is actually a lot of stuff. It's pretty mind blowing when you think about it. So, yeah, I think it's probably cool the fact that because it is, I guess, smaller scale, you do get to cover a lot of areas. It's not just like you're focusing on just the flying. I mean, you can if you want to, but like there's the designing and it's sort of everything, the video editing. If you want to get into cinematics, yeah, you've got that full like color grading and try to do all that. I think it's like super well rounded. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So much stuff is like.
It never ceases to amaze me. I've talked to so many people, and all these folks I've talked to, the story goes like this. Well, sometimes they flew fixed wing or they flew, RC, and then they found drones, and then they put cameras on their drones, like GoPros, and then they started kind of editing, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, this is fun, and then they get a real camera, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I actually know how to do videography now.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have gone to cinematics. Yeah, I think it's cool, especially with some of the race guys, because they're just like, they all focus on the racing and that, and then they go, do a couple film shoots, and it's like, it's just sort of getting that video aspect, and you see like over like 4 different sessions, like how quickly they start picking up like what works, what doesn't. It's really cool. For me, I did some YouTube videos like before flying. I was into making Legos, so I used to put little tutorials up. They're like not great edits, but I guess for the time it was pretty good. They're all done on the iPhone. But and then I got into fixed wing because my dad was into RC and stuff, and then fixed wing FPV, and then drones were cool because you can take off and land vertically. So that meant that before school, after school, I could pick just a small park where no one was around and actually fly instead of having to travel an hour away, or the main spot we used to fly fixed wing, it was a private property that one of our friends had, a friend of a friend, and it was like 10 kilometers or more than 10 kilometers of land, but it was like 10 kilometers straight we used to do, and so that was like an hour and a half away there. So being able to sort of pick a park and fly was awesome.
What was the beginning like for you? How old were you when you first flew a drone?
Okay. So
Or you can go even further back if you want.
Began 2011 for me.
Okay.
So I was 12. Just like Bixlers and stuff. Then 2012 was, I think, the first time I ever saw a tricopter. It was one of our friends built. Jable at YouTube, if you want to search him up and see some of the old videos. There's pretty funny stuff with like plywood drones and the was it
Right.
plush motors or something like that, or plush ESCs. I can't remember what they were, but some Hobby King thing. And then 2013 was when I flew my first quadcopter. And that was a little Ladybird V939. Just acro mode. There was no stabilization or anything, and it was really underpowered. Like, it would have had just over a 1-to-1 power to rate ratio. So if you made any mistakes, you got into your prop wash at all, it would just fall out of the sky. Actually, I think a lot of my flying I'd attribute to that little thing, just because it was so underpowered. It just like, you made any mistake, it just fall out of the sky. So I think that taught me a lot. And then it would have been, I think, end of 2013. I flew FPV. Did I fly FPV drones the first time there? No. It would have been early 2014, the first Melbourne multi-rotor meet. Okay. It was hosted by one of our like local guys at the time. There was like sort of the general skill of everyone, and this camera, and the one guy was just like way more skilled than everyone else. And he really inspired me. But yeah, for that event, we like got a drone ready in like 24 hours. We just like, it was a Flame Wheel 450, and then the standard camera. Yeah, one of those guys.
So, the one that disintegrates every time it touches the ground.
Yeah. So it was funny, but I think because I got into the fixed wing, I was terrified of breaking things. So it was only at the second multi-rotor meet I finally broke something. I just like drifted into a tree. It was the dumbest crash. I was like, why did I do that after I like did a race? It was the first race I ever did too. So look at that video somewhere on YouTube. It's pretty funny. It was like 2 sticks and a gate, but the gate was like a 6-meter gate.
Oh my God.
It's pretty crazy. Great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're flying effectively like X class at that point, or near about.
Yeah.
So, so now so that was what, 2000, would you say 2013, 2014?
Yeah, I think 2014 is when I just started flying FPV quadcopters, and it was like March of 2014 when the mini quads came out, and that was when that second so it was like the first multi had been in February or January, and then in March I think was the second one, and that's when like a couple of the guys had mini quads, and there was the Blackout, there was a Minion. Minion was the first quad that I earned. I think the CGX we got flying first, CGX 250, but the Minion was the first one that was actually like my quad, not Dad's. And then one of the guys made his own, and that was the guy that was like sort of ahead of everyone else, where a lot of people too, they had like the Nazair 32, just the standard one, Rev 1, but he was on multi-Wii.
Oh wow.
And it was just like you'd sometimes flash it and it wouldn't even work. It would just do like you'd have to flash it multiple times to make it work. But he was like, just absolute god level for the time, making this thing do magic. And so he was cool. He was really, really cool dude. Yeah.
When do you feel like you first became competitive?
For me, I think the decision I made to like sort of get competitive was in sort of end of 2015. At that point, there were 2 races that had happened in Melbourne that was sort of an official club, the Melbourne Multi-Rotor Racing Club. They were sort of doing 2 practice races. The first race I won, but there wasn't that many people there because it was just a test event. And then the second event was when sort of, all the main names within Victoria sort of came up. And there was one guy, Stunt Double FPV, who like I always really looked up to. He was sort of the one where like, everybody was sort of at this general level, and then he was just like a million tiers above everyone. He really got me into FPV, and so I finally got to race against him. Heads up until that point, all the racing was time trials. This was sort of your first heads up racing, at least in Melbourne. And I held him for an entire lap, and it felt great. I crashed straight after that, but it felt really good. And it was sort of at that point where I decided I wanted to start getting competitive. And I think honestly, just that little mindset switch just sort of changed everything, where I really started training a lot harder, really sort of analyzing my flying a lot more. And it was sort of, I feel like in maybe a 2-month window, I sort of went from being just sort of general pilot to, sort of consistently getting top finishes, at least within the local scene. This was sort of before national events and that. At that point, the US champs had happened. and that was it. And then like end of 2015, early 2016 is when they announced that Dubai race, and we did a lot of stuff with FPV models when they were more into the mini quads and that. And so one of the main guys, Jason from FPV Models, he was like, "Oh, you should actually submit a video to try and qualify for it." As a video submission to qualify for the event, not a time trial or anything. Just submit a video of who you are and show some of your flying. Yeah, to be able to do certain what do you call it, like split S's and stuff. They sort of had like a checklist of can you do this, this, and this. So you just submitted a video of you doing that stuff. So you said just do it. So we made a video, submitted that sort of. I think it would have been end of 2015, like late December. And then like one day I was going to school, and then just a normal day, and then we came back, and then my dad's just like, "Yeah, you're going to Dubai on Tuesday." I'm like, "What?" So that was sort of like crazy. It's like right from like I want to get competitive at this, and just like racing at local club races to we're going to Dubai, just as you do. So it's like telling my teachers like. It was a Friday night, right? So I'd finished school on Friday. It was like, yeah, finished school. Okay, what homework did I go through? Oh, yeah, going to Dubai. What? So that's sort of how it happened. And that's when we sort of, like, I think at that point, everyone had their niche. Like, I think Banny was, like, ridiculously good at all the indoor stuff, right? I think definitely outdoor tracks I was a lot more confident in. But then it was like all of a sudden, well, we're going to all get to meet and see, like, what we're like. That was cool because you got to meet, like Metal Danny. Boris wasn't there, but I met Metal Danny. Obviously Luke Bannister. Got to catch up like Chad Nowak, Steele, all those guys again. Peter. Oh gosh, I don't know how to say his last name. Peter Cipril, I think it is. The guy that was on Flight Yeah, he was there as like the mechanic for Team Rotor Riot, so that was sick. I got to meet him and just sort of a whole bunch of like, I think it was 64 teams, so 64 pilots, but each pilot had like 5 crew with them. So there was heaps of people, heaps of different well-known pilots at the time, and even like a lot of the other guys that weren't maybe race pilots at the time. Not that there was really racing and freestyle pilots, and it was just, did you fly a quad? And if you did, you did racing and freestyle. But like there was all different pilots, and even like the mechanics, half of them were FPVs that you watched on YouTube and stuff. So catching up with all those guys was just like, that was ridiculously awesome. But I feel like at that point, that was sort of the first time that I sort of got to see where I sat with sort of the world scene. Because up until that point, the only other like organized sort of event that had international sort of mixing together was the US champs. Well, I think it was called US Drone Nationals, but
well, it was called US Drone Nationals.
It's hard to imagine a young Thomas barely getting around the track, barely doing the thing that he does so easily now. And it is truly, truly awesome to see him do the amazing things that he has done so far. In the next episode, we talk about Dubai, and we talk about the number of wins he's had, and a lot of other things. I hope that y'all enjoy it, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.